And now on the show, we're going to take a look at a film that I feel is one of the best films of this year. The film is Civil War, and it's written and directed by one of my favorite writer-directors, Alex Garland. Where do I start with this movie? Well, the film's set in the not-too-distant future, and America is in the middle of a brand new civil war. With the presidency dissolved into a dictatorship under the reign of current president, played by Nick Offerman, various militias and rebel groups have risen up against the US armed forces that are working for the president. And when I say that as a dictatorship, it's because apparently, according to the storyline here, he went into a third term. Of course, if you know your American history and your American politics, a president can only do 2 terms. He's gone into his third term supposedly unopposed, which I guess you take it that there was no election. So these militias and groups have taken up arms against the armed forces with the aim to bring down the president. Now, with word that a group known as the WF, the Western Forces, are about to attack Washington and kill the president, world-renowned photojournalist Lee Smith, played by Kirsten Dunst, and journalist Joel, played by Wagner Moura, decide that they want to travel into the danger zone in an attempt to score what could potentially be the president's last interview. Now, not only is it dangerous for the journey that they're doing, apparently this president has a little bit of a history of not liking the media and perhaps getting rid of a few journalists over the years as well. Their trip, though, is made even more dangerous by the fact that Joel decides to bring along aging reporter Sammy, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson, and eager young photojournalist Jessie, played by Kaylee Spaney, who is eager to learn from her mentor Lee. Now, Lee, that sounds weird because we're talking about a character called Lee, but Lee, what did you think of Civil War? Because I probably went into this movie with a complete bias because I love Alex Garland's work.
All I can say is, wow, this is a masterpiece. Follows, of course, as you said, journalists, and I guess 2 of the journalists are very experienced. They know their stuff. They've confronted a lot of traumatic stories in the past, and so that follows the storyline of Lee and Joel, and of course they're trying to capture the right photograph, amazing photography of what's happening. But then you've got the inexperienced Jessie, who's just starting out, just new, but she's following her idol. She looks up to Lee. She's been following Lee's work, and she wants to be just like Lee. And so then, of course, you've got the character of Sammy, who also is tagging along and is also an experienced photographer as well.
Yeah, I didn't actually get it coming across, but I found doing interviews for this film that apparently he is also supposed to have been Lee and Joel's mentor.
Yeah,
in the early days.
I picked that up. They had a strong connection, but they're worried for him because he's getting older, and they think that it's too dangerous.
And he can't run because of his physical condition.
He can't run.
Yeah.
And so, I think it really brought out a lot for me in just understanding, that journalists and photographers are right in the midst of really horrific scenes, and what they see they can't unsee. But what they see they can't stop either. It's not their job to interfere and to try and stop what's happening. It's their job to expose what's happening and to show the world what's really happening. There were scenes where I was like, would a photographer be allowed, or a journalist really be allowed to be right inside of a war zone like they were in this film? So I had questions like, would they really be allowed? Would they be seen to be like in the way? Because then they needed to be protected as well as being, right in the midst of, whether it's gunfire or bombs or whatever's happening. would they really be allowed to be that close to the story? And, I think you and I were talking about that on the way home, and you were saying, yeah, they would have been allowed.
Yeah, there's been a lot of footage, and I guess, like, with the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel at the moment, because of social media, we get to see a lot more footage than what we would normally have seen, say, of the Iraq war. So I've actually been watching a lot of footage of moments where journalists suddenly have to pull over because the opposing forces are on both sides of the road of where they are, and like there's bullets and missiles just flying over journalists' heads. So
those questions then come up of, is it worth them putting their lives on the line to expose the stories? Is it responsible? Is it not responsible? But of course, stories also need to be exposed. So, I found myself kind of toing and froing with, should they really be there? Should they not be there? Is it worth putting an extra life on the line to what's already on the line? But I think that was the brilliance of the movie, that it was creating those questions, those emotions. There were also moments of, why there's people fighting each other, but it feels like they don't even know why they're fighting each other. And there's some great lines in there that you'll hear in the movie. Really great lines. And you're like,
how do you know they're the enemy? Because they're shooting at us.
They're shooting at us. And so they're protecting themselves. But are they even sure of what stance each person is taking? Or is it just gotten to such a tumultuous time that people don't even have time to ask, what side are you on? Because there's no room for discussion. It's shoot or be shot, like shoot back or be shot yourself. And I think that was really clever, the way that was written, because we do have war going on around us in the world. We know that this is, there's always been war in the world, but it just feels like there's more possibility at the moment of something bigger breaking out. There's, with Israel and, will other countries get involved? And where's that going to lead? But also, of course, we're talking here about an internal war within a country, a civil war. But that can happen, and we know that can happen. It has happened before, and it's probably not going to be the last time. And with the way the world is at the moment, I think that terrible power and control that we see in real life is ongoing, and people will do anything to maintain power and control. Yeah,
and we know that there's been experts that have come out and said that America is the most divided that it's been since the first Civil War that they had. Well, we say the only Civil War that they've ever had. But, apparently the states at the moment are so divided that it almost is state for state in America. So
yeah, and we do hope this doesn't happen, but I guess it's something that could happen. Now, there were some really quite traumatic and horrific scenes in this movie, and I'm just going to give a little glimpse. It might be a little bit of a spoiler, but there was a scene where one of the characters, and I won't say who, ends up in a pit on top of a load of dead bodies and things like that. And, to see them crawling around and dealing with that, you just felt for that character. But, it's just disgraceful that humans can get to that point where they're okay with just creating pits of bodies because it's killed or be killed. Like, kill others or to protect yourself, or be killed yourself. And I guess the humanity in all of it is questioned. And you see some up close shots, even, I won't say which character, but there is a character that dies. Well, there's a couple, but, the very close-up shot of what happens to that person is quite confronting.
Mm.
And you can honestly feel how the effect on their friends or colleagues would be great, and how they would then suffer from PTSD and not be okay. But yeah, just that horrific internal protection that people have to have, and they'll do anything to survive, just comes across really well in this movie. And yeah, I think you walk away just almost being really upset that humans can be so horrible, but also so proud that there's people that will stand for the right thing, and people that will put their lives on the line to expose that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the power of this movie, and I think it's what kind of, I don't know, there's a naturalism to this film. And Alex Garland has always been a writer, and I say writer because he was a writer before he was a director. He's always been a writer that looks at the world and almost sees the future. It's kind of scary. He did it with Ex Machina, where he made a movie about the relationship between a human and an AI. And now we're seeing a lot of that stuff that he did in that movie coming to life, like with around AI. Now with this film, you do have to be careful the way that you talk about it, because Alex Garland has said, and we have to trust him on his word, that he actually had the idea of this film before the insurrection at the end of Trump's presidency, and that he had the idea for this film prior to Donald Trump being in as a president. So we have to take his word on that, and if that is so, then that's even more eerie, because the what happens in this movie feels like what could have happened if things had been pushed further. He's also been very vehement that the character that Nick Offerman plays, the president, is not based on a real person. So again, we have to take Alex Garland's word for that. But he has played this pretty smartly when it comes to politics, because first of all, the two states that you feel dislike each other the most in real America, California and Texas, are aligned here. They're the states that are leading this together against the armed forces. But also, because this film is told through the eyes of journalists, there's no political bias at all with this film. It's not saying that the Democrats are right or the Republicans are right. It's just, this is what's happening. This is this civil war. But I think that eerie realism with this film, I remember back when Black Hawk Down came out, that they invited a lot of the soldiers that had fought for Australia and America in that conflict to go and see the movie, and the soldiers actually had to get up and leave the cinema because it was so eerily realistic to what actually happened, and that's happened again with this movie, that Alex Garland has made this movie so realistic that, as we learnt from our show last week, Kirsten Dunst suffered some elements of post-traumatic stress after she finished the film. I think the one person that you and I haven't mentioned up until now that deserves some credit is Kirsten Dunst's husband, Jesse Plemons, who plays a homicidal rebel soldier in this film, and he's only realistically on screen for 10 minutes, but wow, what a 10 minutes. Can you give someone an Oscar nomination for a 10-minute performance? Because he is absolutely brilliant.
It stands out and it's memorable, and even as you speak of it, I can see it playing out in my mind, because it is a standout scene.
Yeah. But there are a lot of performances like that in this film. To me, I know a lot of people praised Kaylee Spaney for her performance in Priscilla. I thought her performance here was a lot better. Kirsten Dunst, I've always felt for her. She's one of those actresses that was a big thing when she first came about in the early 2000s, and then her career kind of died off. But pairing this movie with The Power of the Dog that came out a couple of years ago, and you're reminded what a brilliant actress she still is. But for me, what got me with this movie was just the realism. Alex Garland has been like that as a writer since, I read his novel The Beach, which ended up becoming a film, when I was a teenager, and there was just something about the way he wrote the characters' emotions that we all go through those emotions, and that's mirrored in this movie. And the talk that this might be his last movie as a director, that kind of saddens me, because I think he is a director that's still got plenty to give. I love it when he collaborates with Danny Boyle, and I wouldn't be disappointed if he just became a screenwriter and worked with Danny Boyle for the rest of his life. But I think Alex Garland has shown with movies like Ex Machina and this one that he is a brilliant director. So hopefully the talks of him stepping back from directing are false, and that he's going to keep going, because, I think this is an absolutely amazing film. Lee, what are you going to give Civil War out of 5, and why?
I'm going to give it 5 out of 5. I think that it was written well, directed well. The footage was, as you said, made it so realistic that it felt like almost
a documentary.
Yeah, documentary, that you were following journalists and photographers. And, people do this real live work, and it was a glimpse into that. And it just brought up so many emotions, so many questions, confusion. And I think that confusion was meant to be. You were meant to be confused at times. I don't think it was miswritten or misacted. I think that confusion was meant to be there. Even the end of the film is ambiguous. Can I say that? And there was a little bit of confusion around a character. I don't want to give too many spoilers, which is why I'm being careful. But I think that was meant to be as well. I think it was meant to be left like that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm giving this movie 5 out of 5 as well. It looks amazing. It is well written. It is well acted. It's just one of those movies that stays with you for such a long time. In fact, we went and saw this movie, and then a few days later, I had a day when I had a media screening in the morning and a media screening at night, and I had a huge chunk of the day I had to fill in the city. I went and saw it again, just because I loved it that much. I feel, as a writer myself, I learn a lot from watching movies like this. I call it learning from the master, when you're learning from Alex Garland as a screenwriter, and I just find it absolutely amazing. So yeah, I'm giving Civil War 5 out of 5 as well. It is a general release, so check your local cinema guide, and it should be showing at a place near you. We are giving Civil War 5 out of 5.